Thank you for coming. This is the applicant webinar for the DARE UK Real World Research Exemplar call. And just to give a quick agenda, we will start with a background on DARE UK and where we are with our program in phase 2. Our director, Fergus MacDonald, will speak to that, followed by Professor Jim Smith giving a background on the Trevolution program. So this is all very intertwined with that. So we'll have an opportunity to hear about Trevolution. And then I will give you some details about this funding opportunity. And then we will have one of our PAG contributors speak about the importance of public involvement and engagement with this call. And finally, if there's time, we will open it up to questions. And if not, there again, as I mentioned, there'll be another opportunity to ask questions later on this week on Thursday as well, where we'll have a collaboration cafe. And with that, I will start it up with, pass it on to Fergus to speak about DARE UK.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Najma. So morning, everyone. Again, just to echo Najma here, welcome. And, thank you all for your interest in the call. I'm the Deputy Director, so slight correction there, Deputy Director of the DARE UK program. And I think it's just important that applicants have a sense of sort of the DARE UK program more broadly, because this call is a bit different, I would say, in that it is there is quite a few dependencies on work that is ongoing at the moment and a need to work together with that program of work, as well as then delivering sort of the applications you're going to be putting in. So that's the reason for this, right? I think it's important that you all have a sense of the context and how the real world research exemplars fit into the broader DARE UK program of work. So just to start with at the sort of very top, what is DARE UK all about? Fundamentally, it's about sensitive data, right? And what we mean by sensitive data is data affecting people, communities, and populations. Now, that scope speaks to the fact that we are not, from a DARE UK perspective, interested in specific research domains per se. Our interest is in the sensitivity of the data, right? So whether you're sitting within the social sciences space, you're sitting in the health sciences space, you're sitting in some of the more harder science spaces, if you're looking at how to work with sensitive data for the purposes of research, then that is within the scope of the program. The second is then, I guess, the sort of second touch point of the scope is really around data linkage and really at looking at trying to answer those research questions which are intersectional and they sit at some of the boundaries of, let's call it the more traditional data domains or science domains, right? So it is trying to bridge across and do data linkage to answer tough research questions. And then the final touch point of the scope is really that it is an infrastructure program. So what I mean by infrastructure, because it's quite an overused term, I think, what we mean by infrastructure in the DARE UK context is it's really around the people, technical and process infrastructure that wraps around trusted research environments to enable TREs, as we call them, trusted research environments, to provide access to researchers to sensitive data safely and securely. So that is sort of the scope of the program. Najwa, we can click through the vision and mission. I'm not going to sort of go through this in too much. I'm not going to read through the slides are there afterwards, so you can have a look at the vision and mission. But really, what are we trying to do? So, and this is sort of the way that we frame what the DARE program is trying to do, right? It is really about trying to translate work into services and capabilities that are useful for researchers to deliver research in the public benefit using sensitive data. So again, I'll go through this pretty quickly. It's about how can we make it possible? Sorry, Naj, staying on the previous slide. How can we make it possible? What is the infrastructure we need to put in place? Not just technical infrastructure, but also process and people and all the information governance infrastructure that needs to exist in the space we're in. How can we make it easier? What kind of training and tools can we provide to the users, i.e. you all on the call, the researchers, but also training and tools for the operators of trusted research environments to make it easier to do the kind of research, the kind of work we're looking to do here. How can we make it normal, right? How can we support communities to come together, share good practice, and collaborate? It's really a cultural shift towards collaboration. And then how do we make it rewarding? How can we sort of start to construct the right incentives for people to engage in this kind of work? And policy, how do we make it required? Now, the two on the right are probably a slightly more forward-looking in terms of the incentives and policy. We have focused a little bit more on the three on the left, and I'll get into that now. So Naj, we can go to the next, please. So just in terms of where we are with Dare UK, I won't spend too long on sort of talking about phase one, but there was a phase one. Is more or less, I guess, what you would need to know here, that all the resources around what was done in phase one are available on the website. And, you know, there will be links on the slide when we share it with you. But really, phase one was focusing on these two areas, right? Starting to explore what's possible, starting to look at how we can coalesce a community around what's possible and what we think we need to be able to do in the future. So that's what phase one was all about. A lot of listening, a lot of trying to understand really the challenge space that we're in. All right, we can move to the next one, Ash, because this will all be shared. So we are now in phase two. So that's the phase that we're currently in. We're about sort of midway at the midway point through phase two. Again, focusing, still staying on what is possible, right? Because this requires work, it requires maturity. We'll get into that. Still focusing on building the community around what is good practice, and increasingly looking at training and tools to make it easier to do sensitive data research in the UK. So we'll jump to the next. And as you can prod me if if I'm not going quick enough, I know we're on a tight schedule here. So I'm going to sort of build up the different pieces of the program so that you all understand where the research exemplars fit into the sort of broader program of work. So at the sort of heart of phase two is what we call the Treevolution project, which Jim is going to talk to in a bit more detail. These are essentially the folk who are trying to make it possible, right? They're trying to make it possible. And these are the areas, you'll see them here, and Jim is going to dive into a bit of this, but these are the areas: federated analysis, disclosure control. How do we do output checking more efficiently, more effectively? How do we do that when it is an AI or a machine learning model that is potentially going to leave a trusted research environment? How do we do that? Right? And what are the standards for TREs, the standards for federated analysis that we can all start to get behind and work with? So that's Treevolution. That's at the very heart of phase two. Then we have what we call our early adopters. These are 6, actually 7. I think one has just been announced. There's a 7th one. But we have our early adopter program of work, and they're really working with the Treevolution team. So the central bit there to go, well, can we actually, from a technical process information governance perspective, can we actually take on board these capabilities you're developing? So you're building these things. Can we actually configure them? Can we install them? Can we adopt them into our trusted research environments? Right. So that's what this cohort is doing, working with Treevolution. And then we come to effectively this call, right? Which is, okay, we've built these things, we've made it possible. We've tested them, we've configured them, we've adopted them in a number of trusted research environments in the UK. Now, can we actually do something with them? Are they useful, right? Can we use them? Can researchers use these capabilities to deliver research outputs? And I think it's important just here to emphasize that it is a dual purpose, right? This funding call, there's dual purposes, and I know this is sort of written in the call specification. So please, as I said, this is not a traditional sort of funding call. Read carefully through the call specification. The dual purpose is that it is both to sort of test and strengthen TRE capabilities and support the work of Treevolution and the early adopters in taking those capabilities towards use, right? Towards use in actual research. So it is in part testing that and going, yes, there is utility here. Yes, this is useful. I can use these things to do research as a user, as a researcher. And of course, then the second purpose is really to demonstrate the utility, right? To actually do some research and show that there are research outputs that can be generated, valuable research outputs using these capabilities. So that's the dual purpose. It's both to prove that the infrastructure works, but also prove its utility for researchers, for all of you, essentially, right? We can move to the next here, Naj. Just to flag that there is we do have a community of practice that we try to support with various community groups. So feel free to check all of those out on our website. We also have a portfolio of innovative projects. Sorry, Naj, can we just jump back quickly? We also have a portfolio of innovative projects, which an announcement will be coming out soon on. This is probably less relevant for this call, so I won't go into too much detail there. And I know Joyce is going to touch on this, but just to emphasize again, critically, for DARE UK, woven into every component, including our work, right, as the kind of core team, is public involvement and engagement. It's not a negotiable. So please pay real attention to this. Joyce, who's a member of our public advisory group, is going to talk to this and give a bit of insight from her point of view. But please think very carefully about your public involvement engagement plans, how they fit with the work you're trying to do. It's not a negotiable. It is a requirement, as we've stated in the funding call. So please think about that very carefully. And again, we have some guidelines. There are groups like Pedro who can showcase what good practice looks like. So there are resources you can leverage to do this as well. But I'll leave Joyce to talk about that as well. I just wanted to emphasize it right at the end here. I think that's it, Naj. I guess the only final thing I would say then from my point of view, we can go to the next slide, is this is phase 2 at the moment, right? So we're in the middle of phase 2. The research exemplars are a key bit of phase 2 in trying to showcase the utility, right? Is this useful for research? Can researchers use these capabilities to deliver impactful research in the public benefit? Of course, we're also thinking about phase 3, which will come post March 27. And a lot of the work the research exemplars, along with all the other components of the program, are doing is going to inform what that kind of roadmap and future view for DARE UK looks like. So that's the only thing I'll add here. I think, Naj, that's it for me. I don't know if I'm on time, but hopefully.
Yeah, you're perfectly on time. So I'll invite next to the mic, Professor Jim Smith. He will be speaking now about the Trevolution program that Fergus had just mentioned. So you're up next, Jim.
Hi, everybody. So for those who haven't met me, I'm Jim Smith. I'm a professor of AI at UE. I tend to describe myself as both an AI geek and a disclosure control geek. So you can probably guess which parts of those Trevolution I'm involved with. So Trevolution is about taking the whole picture. It's about bringing a whole load of people who did various bits in the driver project phase together to try and build something coherent. So you can see our beautiful faces there. I'm conscious of time. If we can move on, I'm sure you can find these slides, details all in the slides. And the 3 main challenges that we've always got in mind when we're framing Trevolution is that we have to think about the what's possible, what's acceptable. Everything we do has to be acceptable to the public. It has to be acceptable to data owners, and it may take a role in driving some change in governance, but everything has to be underpinned by acceptability, and it's got to be useful. And not everything that's possible is acceptable and useful, and vice versa, especially the last one. I think not everything that's possible and acceptable is useful, and I think that's a really important part of this call for us, is that we need the feedback from people doing real things with the tools that we're creating to really help inform us on what's the most useful things that we can focus on out of all the many things that we've got bright ideas that we could do. So if we could move on, please. And the headline is that it's about trying to do this in a way where we're building standards, we're building standard ways of doing things and of recording what we're doing. We're creating we're building standards, we're creating some exemplars that will help build trust and enable federation, but these are not intended to be the only way to do so. We're kind of saying this is how you could do some of these things. And it's taking that broad view that federation may take all sorts of different ways of working together, which will depend on what researchers need to do. And we'll get into this in a little bit more where we talk about weaves later on the call. So if we can move on. So the parts that builds Treevolution. We're based on Sartre, which was a big community project which has started in the UK and has taken life well beyond the UK now, which is about providing a common set of standards to define a TRE, saying if you say that you're a TRE, then these are the things you should support. And once you can do that, then that makes the ability for TREs to compare each other and automatically say, okay, well, if you're Sartre compliant and I'm Sartre compliant, then we know that we can talk together and you will have equivalent processes and safeguards in place to what we're doing. So the next part, please, is SACRO, which is about, so SACRO is about a formal specification which we're just publishing on what disclosure control should do, and then saying how do we improve that, how do we accelerate it, how do we provide machine actionable support which we can show is the same as what your people are doing manually, and that's for traditional disclosure. We're building that federation, and it's also for AI control. And next slide bit, please. All based around the governance principles of the 5 safes, which again was something that started in the UE, but has now got international traction. It's the decision-making framework, it's the information governance, the thing that provides a lot of the trust basis. Next bit, please. So sitting on top of that, we have a component called Director, which is providing the technical capability to correct theories and tools, what I would very rudely call the plumbing, and Simon would actually not get too upset with me about doing that. It's about being able to know, and again, the trust of knowing that you're doing this in a secure way. Next one, please. Sitting on top of that is a mechanism that can move the analytics around if that's the type of project you're doing, or could move data around if that's the kind of project you're doing. So the idea is that we're building stacks which will support different kinds of federated analytics, whether it's data pooling or sending your queries to data and then reassembling parts. And next one, please. Sitting along all sides of this, we've got this concept of the RO crate. That's a research object crate, which you can think of as a wrapper in a standard format, which lets you capture and store all the metadata so you can have an audit trail saying, this is what we did on this project. This is how all the setups were. This is how everything fitted together and worked. And if we can have the final bit, please. And compliance tools that can be deployed across that. I think if you click next, we'll get a load of pointers about saying, so the bottom ones there, they're about saying, if we do it this way, these things will be acceptable. We can talk about the possible, and then we can talk about the useful on top of that. Okay, so what does this mean in practice? Well, just one aspect of the acceptability, if we can move on, please, is about the PIE work. Just to really emphasize, this is something we're taking incredibly importantly. We're having a lot of people involved in the public advisory groups, active community collaboration cafes, for example. We did one on SACRO that had over 100 people there, I think, and a good majority of them were people from the public, which was absolutely fantastic. Working with different organisations, working very hard on outreach to groups that are hard to reach and which traditionally haven't engaged with the community. But I won't steal other people's thunder on that. So, conscious of time, just to move on. So the things that are going to be there for March that we want that real world exemplar projects might look to engage with. I'll go through a few of these step by step. What's going to be available, what's going to be doing. So the RO safe crates, there is an updated 5 safe RO crate profile describing the usage, a validation service to make sure these things are being correctly put together, and then can be stored in a way that they can be interrogated in a fair way. And there'll be stuff for automated validation and just a standard way of doing stuff so you can package your metadata up saying this is what we did, these are the workflows we did, and it can be available in stores that other people can query, and you'll be able to deal within that. And next one, please. So talking about that metadata, what are we talking about? We're talking about all the bits that and pieces that happened within the TRE in ecosystem. Who did you glue together? What kind of analysis were done? And so on, and with tools for visualizing this and knowing what's been going along. So supporting people to get into that, making it as easy as possible to get people in the way of producing projects where you're automatically creating this fair, accessible, interoperable and reusable workflows. So for the sake of good science. Okay, if we could move on, please. So SARTA version 1 provided the standards for describing about what does a single TRE have to do. SARTA version 2, which is now in beta testing format, says, how do we need to build this out to have support for federation? What's the way for aligning yourself for accreditation against things like ISO 27001, Digital Economy Act accreditation, DSBT and SAF, in a way that's machine readable? So again, if adopters buy into this, it provides a way of being able to do this. That's a slightly different version. It's basically it's an acceptable way of doing it that lets people buy into what they're doing, provide a way of feeding back to make sure this is the right and useful thing to be doing, and feed into what they should be look like, with the idea of being able to do more and more automated negotiation between TREs, and providing that audit trail about acceptability and compliance. Okay, so coming out of the start of Treevolution, one of the things for us it was important to build early on was that we said, we've got the SARTA specification, we know what it should look like to support federated learning. Can we build out an exemplar that supports all these things? And can we do that in a vendor neutral way that you can deploy on whatever your favorite cloud vendor is, or just on-prem, and you can install other things and services into that? That's called Cater, which the Kate I think stands for, I know stands for Kubernetes. So this is available. This is being built out and beta tested now. It's a thing that people might want to start to do because it just makes it a lot easier to build out your TRE, to do it. If you were doing a project where you might have some hesitancy about whether you're going to do it in your main TRE but wanted to do alongside, or you wanted to test out the scalability and the possibility of this, if you're thinking about looking at containerized versions and bring your own code type analysis, Cater is the thing for you. Next, please. So disclosure control with Sacro. So Sacro is intended to be a plug and play tool that researchers can use so that as they're conducting their analysis, it does an automated risk assessment at the time, alongside a viewer tool that output checkers can use to make decisions based on what the automatic risk assessment has done and what the researcher has then captured to do that. Sacro we are building out enhanced documentation usability for it now. There's a fair number of organizations already starting to use it. We're getting feedback already. So the things that we know we're going to be building is a researcher facing version of the output checker, so that, and a load of other things to make it easier for researchers to do, to try and break down the barrier for researchers to use it. There will be an aggregator for distributed analysis type projects. So where you're sending out code to different TREs using one of our weaves, and then partial results are coming back, and we can build those up and build a way that individual TREs can check on what's happened and what's been run. SacroML is kind of the equivalent, but for AI projects, what we know, because what the community told us need there, is that as much as tooling, that's about training and process documents, which will be available. Conscious of time. Next slide, please. So in terms of the tools and adoption, the things that are definitely going to be there to play, these are pretty much there already. So there's a 5 saves version of TES. TES stands for Transaction Execution Service. It's a Global Alliance for Genomics and Health way of doing things. So there'll be a software implementation that can easily be installed in a TOE. So you will be able to say, effectively, this is my container. This is what this has got the analysis script I want to run, and that can be distributed to node TOEs and the result come back. There will be a version of that does cohort discovery, again, easily installable in a TOE, so that supporting that kind of finding out who's got all the data you need to do and how many people have you got. And there's a catalogue of software stacks that can be utilized by TOE in what that group are calling weaves, which is the idea that you would have a whole set of components that support federation in different kinds of federation projects, and you can build those in together. You can weave those into different things that will sit on top of our layers depending on the type of project you want to do. So cohort discovery does kind of what you'd expect it to do. 5 save TOEs provides you TOEs the capability to support federated analysis where you're sending the queries to the data, and your safety controls in that case come because the data is retaining in each TOE. Okay, and I think that's it from me. So those are roughly what we're going to have, and we'll be able to provide obviously more questions, provide more details later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Really appreciate that. And so I will just get into this funding opportunity and, what we're looking for. So, really this initiative is about experimenting with secure research environments in practice. So this is what we mean by demonstrating TREs in action. As Jim showcased, the potential that's there. We want to test and refine these kind of new capabilities, and really just to produce research results as well as stress testing how these Trevolution capabilities function in environments of different contexts. So again, particularly looking at things that are relevant to government, to policy. So in terms of opportunity, for researchers, it's a chance to really help shape the systems that support the sensitive data work in the UK, an opportunity to shape the infrastructure, and really we're trying to
well, I've had to flag it.
Sorry, apologies. Somebody could, yeah. Thank you for that. So it's a chance to raise, your profile, the researcher's profile, and also be part of this networking and building partnerships. Again, it's a chance to connect with public and policy audiences. And what we're really hoping for, the broader goal, is to create those kind of research and innovation that is right now at this point not possible. So we're looking for long-term impact by really unlocking these new forms of research and innovation. So just getting into, again, I really encourage you to go on the UKRI and read. I'm not covering all the detail, but the main, just diving into the kind of the main bits here, which is you have to be based at an eligible UK research organization. And what we're looking for is 1 project lead per person. So you can have multiple co-leads are allowed, but it's important to note that your organization, that the organization that is leading has to be a UKRI eligible research organization. We encourage, you have to partner up with a TRE for this call. Now, if the TRE is in itself a UKRI eligible organization, then they can participate as co-leads or subcontractors. The other thing, the bit to really note here is that we want to, for the applicant to really showcase that they are actively engaged in this type of work. So it's up to you, the researcher, to really showcase how your experience is relevant to this call. Again, like when we're looking for, the cross-domain research using Trevolution capabilities. And another thing to note is like when you're trying to showcase that you are working with a TRE, the other place to note is when you're doing your budgeting and so on, that you are taking into consideration all of the TRE costs. So again, to stress here, if international organizations are not eligible, there are one or two exceptions. If you look on the MRC, the UKRI website, I believe the MRC unit in the Gambia and the UVRI Uganda Research Unit at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. But other than that, international organizations are not eligible as leads. However, they have the opportunity to join international researchers as co-leads. And again, you need to justify this within the application. There is a place to really justify this, why you're bringing in an international researcher. Other international or non-approved UK groups may join as project partners. Now, another thing to highlight here, that if you are under the same kind of like umbrella, so let's say you're based at a university and another researcher in a different department but within the same university wants to apply, they cannot join as a project partner. They would be considered international internal collaborators, and they can be joined as co-leads or specialists, but not partners. So again, just encourage you to read the details in the UKRI website, just to make sure you haven't missed anything here. And so the funding that is available is at full economic cost. So at 100%, the max allowed is up to $609,500. MRC or UKRI will fund 80% of that. And again, stressing here that the duration is only 12 months. So another way the panel will assess this application is just really looking at what is feasible, what is possible within 12 months. So we encourage you to kind of keep that 12-month period in mind. And then again, I'm not going in the details of this really long list. You can see there's so much we do that can be funded, but things that are not funded are like student stipends, equipment over 25K, anything that is related, research costs linked to NHS studies. But there's a lot that we do fund. But again, what I really want to highlight here is that when you are justifying your costs and if you have it, and you should be partnering up with a TRE to include their cost of TRE collaboration. This includes access, setup, and so on. In fact, it would be a big red flag for us if that you have on your application naming a TRE that you are partnering up with, but then do not explain or justify the cost. So with that said, and for the sake of time, we wanted to just focus our last 10 minutes of this call to bring out another important element that both Fergus and Jim touched upon, and that's public involvement and engagement. So I am going to pass the next slide on and bring forth Joyce, who has been a wonderful public member, contributor, advisor to a lot of these similar projects. And we thought she can really drive the message home of why PIE is so important. So Joyce, if you're there, can unmute.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
So hello everyone, I'm Joyce Fox, a member of both the DARE UK and Trevolution Public Advisory Groups. I've actually worked with the DARE UK delivery team from the beginning of phase 1. So public involvement and engagement. Your application should include an explicit and comprehensive work stream on PIE. Because without meaningful and detailed PIE, applications will not be funded, or at least they'll receive a lower assessment and most likely will not get funded. So you need to show clearly where in the project and work programs you will embed PIE and how this feeds into the overall study. So ideally, this will also be integrated into any project Gantt charts that you produce. So in any project structure diagrams or infrastructure diagrams, when you're showing the sort of arrangement of staff and how they come together, it's good to see how and where public involvement is integrated as well. Applications should include a plain language summary, which does not use extremely technical or impenetrable language. And the plain language summary could usefully include a very brief summary about PIE that's planned in the project. So the next point, the costs of all PIE activities should be itemised in the resources and cost justification section. Please don't underestimate the costs of embedding and supporting meaningful PIE. In addition to payment for public contributors for their time, you need to include costs for face-to-face meetings like travel, possible carer or childcare costs, venue hire, refreshments. If it's an online meeting, that may cover possible extra time to support contributors with using online platforms. To ensure involvement of diverse communities, you might need to include costings for interpreters for spoken and signed language and or translators for the written content. You might want to consider supporting public contributors to take part in the analysis section and also the producing and distributing comms and the dissemination of results. So consider what will be needed to achieve this and make sure you cost this in. You also need a dedicated PIE lead who is integrated into the project team. So there should be a named person in the project leadership team who has overall responsibility for PIE. If this is a public contributor, though, and if they're the one and only PIE lead, this needs more examination and reassurance to confirm that the person has the skills, experience, and support needed for such a role. So consider and explain what support they will have. Are they paid a fair rate for this role and commitment? What backup is there to cover the event that they are no longer able to continue in this capacity? That I speak about from personal experience because I was a PIE lead and partway through the project, I wasn't able to continue. So please consider that at the start. What authority do they have within the project team? Or what support do they have from team leaders to hold team members to account for PIE? Is it a role that needs to be co-delivered? So, for example, do you need to have someone on the research leadership team as a PIE co-lead? Ideally, someone with the authority to ensure that PIE takes place as planned across all work packages. If it's co-delivered by a research team member and a public member, what is that relationship? Will the research PIE lead take an active role in PIE? Will they be acting in a support capacity for the public PIE lead? Or will PIE be truly co-led with a very equal leadership? So anyone taking on the role of PIE lead, whether that's a public member or a research team member or a combination of both, you need to show what previous experience they have had in such a PIE leadership role. Additionally, members of the public calling them public contributors or advisors, probably not advisable to call them representatives because nobody actually represents the whole of the public. So they need to be involved in the project delivery. So are public contributors and advisors diverse? What support will you provide? So lots of things to consider about how best to embed and support public contributors. Next slide, please. So during the project, you should have a clear and robust mechanism for collecting feedback from public contributors or advisors and collecting the impact of their contribution. So this might cover showing how you will capture, measure and evaluate PIE impact. How will you share and disseminate and publish your learnings on PIE impact? Consider publishing on PIE in the Research Involvement and Engagement Journal or similar. So PIE should be monitored with PIE activities, PIE impact, their feedback, and their impact captured and recorded in an impact log or similar. Ideally, you will use this information to report on PIE. And consider how public contributors can co-design and co-develop these aspects. You know, how are they going to support and actually advise on methods for capturing, measuring and evaluating PIE? All of this needs to be well costed in as well. And it links in with the third and fourth bullet points on this slide. So how are you going to set out PIE measurement indices? How are you going to include processes to track, anonymously of course, the demographics and engagement information about public contributors? And then the second bullet point on this slide is be prepared for a possible Day UK PIE evaluation. So we will work with you to support you across your project, including supporting the PIE function. And we might select projects at random to conduct a PIE evaluation. This is as much to provide a learning exercise for the Day UK team, but also as a learning exercise for projects as well. Next slide, please. So what does good PIE look like? So PIE activities need to be sufficiently and appropriately costed. A point to clarify is that PIE funding does not include the cost of the project team member responsible for PIE, even if the PIE lead is a member of the public. That becomes part of the leadership team costings. So all PIE activities and public contributors involved need to be clearly and adequately funded, whether that's for face-to-face or virtual meetings. You need to consider the range of involvement activities and engagement activities, engaging the wider public, really considering the costs that this will incur. Please don't undercost them. Really think about what will be involved. Second point, engage members of the public who reflect a diversity of demographics and communities. So it's important to seek impact from a range of different people, including those who know nothing about data research or about TREs, those who may never have been involved previously, and ensure that they are from a diverse range of backgrounds. So many people may not feel comfortable joining an online group with unknown people or a face-to-face group in an unknown location with unknown people. So it can be helpful to arrange to attend community groups and network meetings or similar. So you joining their face-to-face or online meetings where people are actually familiar with group organisers and members, and those group organisers can act as a very productive bridge between yourselves and the members of that group. And please think creatively. Think about all the sort of really interactive ways that you can actually engage with and involve public members. Engage with existing community groups to reach diverse public voices. You don't have to develop groups from scratch every time. You can use existing ones. And please do work with those group organisers. They can be a really good, quick way in. And then embed the PEDRI good practice standards. PEDRI stands for Public Engagement in Data Research Initiative, and there's a link on the slide to those standards. And in addition, you can also use the UK standards for public involvement. And again, there's a link there. And then just a few additional points to consider. So you need to have PIE in the governance of the project. But if PIE is limited to just one public contributor on a governance or advisory board, this is not enough. In this capacity, there should be at least two or more, because one doesn't really provide diversity, and their views that they are able to bring don't represent, I don't like that word, but they don't convey a wider sort of perspective. What happens if they're unable to attend a meeting for whatever reason? How will public perspectives then get fed in? So you do need more than just the one. In addition to the PIE and governance, there should also be a much wider range of PIE activities. So involvement and engagement, you need to show how the project links in with and maybe leverages existing PIE work with and across partners that you work with. But it should be, PIE should be embedded and integrated throughout the project. There should be a golden thread of PIE running throughout, and not just discrete blocks of PIE activities. Think about what support you will give public contributors. That can be on a research topic specific support, involvement specific support, or pastoral related. And then just a final point on PIE terminology. Participation, involvement, and engagement are three very distinct and different functions. Participation is where participants take part in research, their data is captured for analysis, and they will have completed a consent form to consent to the use of their data. Involvement gives public contributors the opportunity to shape the direction of the project, working with researchers as member of the project team. And then engagement is sharing information about the project with wider audiences, and also seeking public views and priorities and concerns about the work that you're doing. So it's a two-way conversation. It's not just about giving information out. Those three components should not be conflated or used interchangeably. And remember, final point, there is no upper limit to the amount of award that can be dedicated to PIE. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions later. I'll hand back.
Thank you so much, Joyce. That was so thorough, and I hope it drove the point of how important PIE is to this project, to this call. So just quickly, in terms of what's next, we do have another opportunity this week for you to also, I know we're running very late on time, but there's the Travolution Collaboration Cafe happening this Thursday. And again, it's an opportunity to ask questions and explore any potential partnerships. We also really encourage you to visit the Travolution website. I'll put a link in the chat. Again, to just learn about the work and all the possibilities. And then at the very end of the month, when hopefully you've started your application and there might be some last minute questions or so on, we have another drop-in session on the Thursday on the 23rd of October. So again, you will have the opportunity to follow up. And please mark your calendars. 5th of November is when the closing date for this the application on the UKRI website. And then finally, just to note that the main email to send any queries related to the call, if you have, especially if it's all related to the UKRI process, I encourage you to email the informatics email that's listed there. But again, if you need any further clarifications, I'm also available and I could get your questions answered for you. So here is our, again, please follow our work. And I guess we have 5 minutes, and then I'm just looking through the chat of if there is any specific particular questions we wanted to answer from the chat. Fergus, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. I'm sure we've missed some, so please do put your hands up and flag if you want us to elaborate on something we've responded to or have missed something. Just maybe starting with Anna's question, Anna Head. How does this call fit in with the recent DUK Next Generation Trusted Research Environments Capabilities call? So Anna, you'll remember sort of from the diagram that I showed of all the sort of different pieces of the program. And I don't know, Naj, maybe just leave, it's fine. We don't need to go back to that. But essentially, you would have seen what we called kind of the innovators, right? So they're sort of sitting slightly outside this, the onion, as we call it, right? The kind of circles that I've got. And they're sort of really the early proof of concept exploratory projects that we funded. And the idea, of course, would be that they would have the potential, and this is still to be defined, but they would have the potential to be carried through the same kind of maturity cycle as you see in sort of the middle bit of the diagram I've got. I don't know, maybe let's skip to the diagram, Naj, if you can quickly flick to it. I think or maybe it's too difficult. But so that's how it fits, Anna. The next gens are really piloting proof of concept, really early exploratory work on some of the emerging capabilities that that TREs are needing to address. And so they're not tightly coupled to the other elements of phase 2 for exactly that reason, right? They're very exploratory, very early on. And of course, there may be an opportunity for those to be carried further in future and matured, but that's all to be defined, to be confirmed. Did that answer, maybe just Anna, did that answer your question? So you'll see them on the right hand, well, the right and the left on the outside here, what we call the innovators, right? Early testing, proof of concepts, piloting.
Sorry,
Was
can I ask
that-
a follow-up question? Is that okay?
Sure.
So
Sure.
could you use some of those innovators projects in this third call, or is the general sort of feeling that they're not developed enough to pull through into research exemplar?
Yeah, the feeling is they're not developed enough. That wouldn't be appropriate. Cool. Thanks, Nash. I'm not sure, please, if there's other questions we've missed. I think there was one from Gillian. I'm just sort of going through what's on the chat here. Gillian, just on your question, to what extent has there been work already done? And I think Rob's probably come on this a little bit as well. I mean, there has been work done. So if you look at phase 1, and again, all those links will be shared in the slides. If you look at least what DARE UK has done, and we're not the only ones, right? But if you look at what DARE UK has done in phase 1, there was a lot of work done. And again, you might start to see a pattern. If you sort of pay a little bit of attention, you might start to see a pattern. In phase 1, there was a lot of proof of concept, early pilot work done to try and explore the challenge space for TREs in the UK. And what are the kinds of things that we need, the kind of capabilities, as we talk about them, that we're going to need for TREs to support the kind of research that you all as researchers want to do going into the future. And so you can go have a look at a lot of that work. We're not the only ones. There are various pieces of work. ADR UK does work in this space, although we're slightly different to where our focus is. HDR UK does work in this space, again, slightly different to the focus of the DARE UK program. But there is a sort of a host of work, I would say, happening in TREs. And I would also say it is picking up. It is not just that it's happened, but actually I think the priority and the importance of TREs to enable research using sensitive data is increasing, right? At least that's what we see. So I don't know, Gillian, if that sort of, I didn't touch on anything. Yeah, please.
I ask a quick follow-up. I was interested to know whether any of the collaboration through the Data Shield project had been part of the earlier discussions.
So Data Shield, I think we're involved in at least, and I stand to be corrected, at least one of our, what we called our Sprint Exemplar projects. I believe, but I stand to be corrected there. They are involved in.
I need to do my homework on that. Thank you.
Sure, they're also involved. If you look at the early adopter, the link is in the chat somewhere. If you look at the set of early adopters we have, Data Shield is also involved there, and I cannot remember the name now. I think it is someone will probably put it in the chat, but they're involved there as well.
Thank you.
Three minutes. Any other questions that were not addressed in the chat? Okay, anything else from our team? Okay, Fergus. Sure.
Yeah, I've come in here. Maybe just on Colette. Colette, you sort of put a question here about, how would a researcher or project lead engage with, effectively the TRE ecosystem, right? What information exists there? So I've sort of put it in the chat here in response, but I thought just to speak to it. This call is a call because of the constraints around this call, because of the delivery period, because we are trying to test some of the TRE capabilities that are emerging, and because there is a real need to partner with mature TREs where there are mature relationships that exist between those TREs and the researchers who are trying to push the boundaries here, because that's what researchers in this call are trying to do, right? It's trying to push the boundaries of TRE capabilities. It is, I would expect it's going to be quite difficult if you haven't engaged with the TRE ecosystem, if you haven't got established relationships with TRE partners already. I suspect it would be quite a challenge to put in a competitive application here. And I think we should be very clear about that up front. This is a very rapid delivery period. It has a lot of dependencies on the Treevolution work. It requires close working with TRE partners, close working with the Treevolution team. So I would, again, I don't understand the details of your application, right? Obviously, but I just want to sort of highlight that I think it would be tough to put in a competitive application if you didn't at least have some understanding of the UK TRE ecosystem and some relationships already established with TREs in that ecosystem.
Wonderful. Well, if there was no other further questions, I'm just putting in the chat the link to the real world call, but under the DARE UK website, we also have a list of frequently asked questions there at the very bottom. So just put that in the chat as well. So we are right at time. And again, thank you all. Thank you, Fergus, Jim, Joyce, for your time. And please do not hesitate to reach out to the email that was listed or to send me a message as well. I could support you in any way with this call. Okay, and with that, thank you all for your time. Have a good day.